Please direct your attention to the screens for a look at the upcoming season of Hero, The Hidden Economics of Remarkable Women, a podcast series produced by Foreign Policy and made possible in part through funding by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Hi, I'm Rena Ninan, host of The Hidden Economics of Remarkable Women. Each season of our podcast, we brought you stories of women who have not only empowered themselves, but their communities. They've worked to change laws. They've spoken out against misogynistic practices and gender-based violence. And they've pushed leaders in both business and government to be more inclusive and allow more access to women in decision-making roles. And this season, we're about accountability. We're coming for the receipts. We're taking a sharp look at politicians and business leaders who have promised change, and we're asking, have your words led to meaningful actions? We're doing this by hearing from those on the ground who are doing the hard work of collecting data and holding leaders accountable. And we're looking across sectors from media to tech to government to women's safety to ask, how do we make sure these leaders keep their promises? Join us for the next season of The Hidden Economics of Remarkable Women, a podcast from Foreign Policy, made in part by funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Follow us on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts.
Please welcome Rena Ninan for a Hero interview with Julie Mwabe, the Global Advocacy and Public Policy Team Lead at the Global Partnership for Education and former Gender Advisor of Kenya.
Thank you. Wow, look at this packed house today. This is just incredible to see everyone here. Julie, thank you so much for joining us. We're so grateful to have you and to talk about what you've done to transform Kenya. And now you're on a global stage doing advocacy work as well. When back in 2019 to 2022, you were Kenyan president's gender advisor. When you look back at your time there, Julie, what are you most proud of?
Thank you, Rena, and thanks for having me, and good morning, everybody. Beyond what I was able to do, I think it was just the pride of being able to serve my country, and the women who've gone ahead of me, Wangari Maathai, and even Sandra Jambo is here with us today, just who have fought so many barriers so that women and young women can be in leadership. And that was such an honor, a privilege of my life to be able to serve, to be able to address and bring forth the plight of women and girls to a head of state, right? Yeah. And in that role, I think one of the things I was most proud of was during COVID. At the time, the focus was on the health and the impact the virus was having on health. Mm-hmm. But what was not being seen was on the girls, and the adolescent girls particularly. These were girls schools had closed abruptly, yeah, and they were home and now prone to violence, especially. Many were going through, female genital mutilation because now families needed money and they needed to sell off the girls, and there was child marriage. So there was a lot of issues that were going on, including the impact of COVID on their mental health. So just being able to quickly get out and get data and hear from them and get their stories and bring them forward to government and to the head of state and really sound the alarm that we have a problem. Mm-hmm. And the data was, we had about 250,000 girls who had been in school before, but then they were now pregnant, right? And that means they couldn't go back to school. Or those who are just really the mental health, the violence. We had over 50% of boys saying, they were going through violence. So it was a lot, but that was something that, being able to do that was something I was very proud of.
When you look back at those years that you spent there, what do you believe is one of the biggest challenges that you had to overcome in getting sort of the success that you were able to achieve?
The biggest challenge, one of them was, it's one thing to have the data, it's the other thing to act on it, right?
Such a good point.
Yeah, and the challenge would be, you're meeting girls who are like, I am out of school, In a week, I'll be married off. I need to, find a solution for me.
Yeah.
But policy doesn't work like that, right? It is slow, and trying to sort of be able to find those pathways that lead to better outcomes for them or getting them out of those situations. So that was a big challenge, because you're seeing faces. They're no longer numbers, right? They're no longer numbers. They're people who know you. You know them by name. And they stop being percentages on a piece of paper in real life. So that was a challenge, just being able to experience that and feel it on such a personal level.
Julie, trying to get change sometimes, especially in this world of social media, it sort of takes often a horrible moment. Not all the time, but sometimes there is this horrible moment that makes people aware of the situation that's happening. In 2021, President Kenyatta had said this was going to be a huge priority, focusing on gender-based violence. How did that even come to be something that he realized we have to act now?
It's the data, right? You can deny many things, but you cannot deny the data. You cannot deny the numbers. I often say there's nothing like soft data and hard data. There's so much power in storytelling. There's so much power in being able to hear the voice and what's really going on. One of the things that I found during COVID that worked, and right now, it's sad that doesn't happen, is how inclusive we were then. We were all on screens, right? We were all joining these forums, these discussions, and we would have girls or people from remote areas, as long as they had a phone and some bundles, they'll be able to contribute to those conversations. And we are not doing that anymore, right? We've sort of gone back to having conversations with people like us, having the similar conversation, not really hearing from what's really going on with those communities. And I think for President Kenyatta, he was able to connect, especially on female genital mutilation is something that he was very passionate about. And being a head of state, you have the convening power. When you call, everybody answers. So he was able to bring in the apparatus, the health, security, those dealing with sort of just the gender, the education sectors around one table and say, how do we move this forward? Because you cannot do it on your own. It's not a gender thing, right? Yeah. Even if you address somebody's, get them out of safety, they still need to eat, they need to feel safe, they need the nutrition, they need the menstrual hygiene, they need, there's so many things that need to work in tandem. And so that was one of the things, and just the investment that was put. Our head of state can say, let's move the money towards this, and that's something he did, and set up boards and committees that were able to sort of advance the agenda. So that was one of it.
President Kenyatta actually pledged to end gender-based violence in the country by 2026. How do you even begin to achieve such a big goal?
Well, it was an ambitious goal. It was ambitious, but it's like we were all on marching orders, right? Everyone across the government was, this was something we knew, this was something he was prioritizing. And he pledged that before COVID. So COVID, again, had a way of just sort of reversing so much of the traction and so much of the progress, where before we could reach communities, but because of the barriers now, because of COVID, we couldn't. You couldn't go out as we used to. Right. And that sort of enhanced the practice, some of the cultural norms, the perpetrators themselves, So I think we still yet to see what COVID did in terms of reversed gains. Yeah. I think, we sort of move on, but then a lot of those lives, they don't, right? Yeah. They are out of school, their lives have changed, they are moms now, they had goals and dreams that are now shattered. So I think for us to be able to just focus back on really the impact and what we need to do.
On the topic of what we need to do, is there anything that you can point to that's really worked in decreasing gender-based violence?
There are many promising pathways. Education.
You're a big advocate for education. Tell me why this is so important, because we can understand how education will help women and girls and why it can help someone individually. How can education transform a community?
Well, education, it is the driving power, right? It is, the people say it's the great equalizer. When you educate a girl, she's able to make her own decisions. She's able to, on her spending, on what she buys, on her body. You educate a girl, you educate the community. And it's the same girls who come back and able to be the doctors, the nurses, the engineers for those communities, and be able to sort of advance them and get them out of the poverty cycle, right? I think it is that it's a way out, and it's it really sets us apart. I for one, I see a lot of other friends and girls who I grew up and at some point I continued with school and they didn't, and just seeing where they are now, and just lack of economic progress, being in a poverty cycle, and so it really does set us apart.
When you look at girls' education, to increase that around the world, what do you feel needs to be done?
I think one of the things that, and I've touched on it earlier, is when we're in policy, how do you entrench girls what they're saying, and then being part of the process and the decision-making process, and being on this other side of policy, I see it how we so tend to come up with the policies, come on what needs to be done with the recommendations, and then bring them to the conversation. Like, okay, this is what we recommend to be done. But then being more inclusive, being more intentional about reaching out. We're in forums like this, feel like, what, they need to be here too, and how do we be proactive and bring them on? Because it's not as easy. I mean, we are in a world of visas and flights and all these things to be able to get to certain decisions, to get a seat on the table, right? So how do we sort of be more proactive in that way? And then on the data, right? I have to say, the numbers never lie.
Right.
So how do we sort of be able to segregate data and have the right gender indicators on sex, on geography, on disability, so that we are having a more targeted approach. And then also, like I said, we can't do it alone, so bringing the different sectors around the table to be able to discuss and come up with solutions, so that it's not, I often tell the story of how I once went to a school and they had tech, the Wi-Fi, everything had been done for this school, and the girls were on whiz math, and it was somewhere remote in Kenya. But the same girls, the minute they were out of that class, they do not have sanitary pads, right? They don't have, right outside there are men who they're willing to have sex with them so that they can have some money, so they can buy food, so they can also buy pads. So it's such a cycle, and that increases HIV and get pregnant while they have whiz math, right? So how do these sectors actually work together, that we're looking at gender and the well-being of girls in their totality, and not just as body parts? We cannot just do education on its own. You have to look at it at a 360 angle.
That's such a great point. And we've tried really hard through our podcast, The Hidden Economics of Remarkable Women, in multiple seasons, looking at how we can economically empower these women, looking at everything from culture to male allies. How do you transform a culture when for years they've operated under a certain norm, and to convince them education can be really transformative for the whole community?
This is where you involve the community, right? You have to, it is not on us probably sitting here in DC to be able to do that. We have to empower the communities themselves. We have to educate the communities, because only them can educate their children and be able to sort of address these norms. I mean, when I look at female genital mutilation, for example, where we had our head of state having to go into those communities, dress up like them, sit with the chiefs, let them understand what is it. For them, it was not necessarily the female genital mutilation. It was the rite of passage, like from a girl to a woman.
This is what you do.
So this is what
done.
you do. So how about, can we have alternative rites of passage? What else can we do that still gets you to the outcome where you feel, okay, you've sort of had this? So it could be a different ceremony that does not involve mutilating body parts, So that kind of understanding that the rite of passage is what's important, and discussion of, okay, what does it mean?
So being able to distill in a culture what is really valuable and of great importance to them, and how can we help transform this to make it more forward thinking and looking, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, we have to it's not necessarily going in and say what you're doing is wrong.
Right.
Because that's what I think we sort of put a barrier in, okay, I'm not listening to you, you don't understand our culture. But then it's about, okay, I hear you, I see this is important to you, but can we get around the table? What other ways so that you still get to that goal, yet, in a way that is still wholesome and not harmful? Because I think the minute you tell someone that your culture is harmful, they're already not listening.
They
right?
shut down, right? They're not. Julie, in your current role right now, when you look on the global stage of helping to transform education for girls, what do you think is the biggest obstacle that international governments need to sort of tune in on?
Right now, it's the investment, it's the funding. We are in a space globally when there's debt distress. A lot of countries are in debt. The economic situation is really dire for many countries. We often ask countries to, commit maybe 20% of their budget towards education, ensure the funding is efficient and equitable, that reaches the most marginalized communities. But then with the understanding right now that it is tough. But then how do we sort of work around it? How can we sort of make the dollar stretch the most? How can we sort of bring the plight of girls and children particularly who are really, sort of regressing, or that, those who cannot even read by the age of 10, how do we still, bring that evidence to show like this is something that we cannot drop? This is the one space that we need to sort of just continue investing in and ensure that it's transformative and reaches the world's children.
Making sure that girls, when you're talking about being marginalized and also male allies in the community as well, how do you get men and male leaders in particular to rethink their approach and do it in a way that doesn't isolate them?
I think, there's often a notion that when we sort of focus on girls' education, it's at the expense of boys. And it isn't. It is just, hey, can we get to a level playing ground so that we, both boys and girls, are able to achieve, basic education and be able to sort of get jobs and live wholesome lives and contribute to the economies. Male allies are such a strong and powerful, and when they come on board, but it is also, like I said, go to the men, right? Speak to them about it, look at the benefits, this is what works, and bring them around the table. But if you do the one versus the other, oftentimes it doesn't work. It often feels like you're putting one over the other, which you're not.
Julie, before we go, I want to close and ask you, you've had successes and you continue to, but sometimes for people working in the policy realm, looking to see change in the future, wanting to make progress, you can be in a valley, and it can be so hard that you feel you can't get out of this valley. What has catapulted you when you have reached a low point and you feel foreign policy, progress on the policy front could take decades? How do you push forward when you feel like the deck is stacked against you or progress isn't happening fast enough?
I remind myself of my why and why I do what I do. I think there's so much value in going to the level of meeting communities and families and speaking to them and hearing from them. There's so much we can learn. I like to take life with a learning approach and listen. We often don't listen as well as we think we do. We often think we know the solutions, we know what people want, and we are in a culture and especially now that I'm here in the American culture, and I'm like, wow, everything moves so fast, There's always the pressure to deliver, the pressure to move from one to the other. But then where is the value? There is value in just stopping to listen, to go to those communities, to hear what they have to say, and really bring in their solutions on board, right? Bring in their recommendations and almost sit back and say, I don't know, I really don't know what I'm doing, but they know better. So you are here to serve, right? We are here to serve them. We're not here to tell them what to do, but to really live lives of service.
It's a great point. Sometimes starting to get communities and institutions and governments to transform begins with listening. Julie, I want to thank you for your service and your work and for joining us today at the Her
Thank
Power
you.
Summit. We're really grateful to have you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Thank you.
Next, please welcome to the stage Associate Professor at Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service, Dr. Shireen Joshi, Population Institute's Director of Research for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights, Bridget Kelly, United Nations Senior Advisor to the UN-EU Spotlight Initiative to Eliminate Violence Against Women, Erin Kenney, and the White House Gender Policy Council's Deputy Director and Assistant to the President, Rachel Vogelstein, for a conversation with FP's Vice President of Research, Dr. Maisha Alam, on sexual and reproductive health and gender equity.
Hi, everybody, and good morning. It's wonderful to see such a packed room of passionate and dedicated professionals who are here to discuss common interests. And I'm really, really excited and honored to have the opportunity to moderate this particular panel, which is on connecting the dots